May I hold her? Millionaire CEO does unthinkable for single mom's baby. May I hold her? Millionaire CEO does unthinkable for single mom's baby. The opulent ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the shimmer of designer evening wear. Riley Daniels adjusted his perfectly tailored Armani suit as he made his calculated entrance. At 27, he had mastered the art of commanding attention without seeking it. His dark hair was expertly styled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his steel-gray eyes held the kind of intensity that made most people look away first. "Mr. Daniels, wonderful to see you," called out George Harrison, one of the city's most prominent real estate developers. Riley gave him the practiced smile he reserved for such occasions. Polite, but distant. "George." He shook the man's hand firmly. "The Foundation's work this year has been impressive." It was the kind of empty small talk Riley had perfected over years of similar events. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, stopping briefly to exchange pleasantries with board members and fellow CEOs. Each interaction felt like a business transaction, mechanical and devoid of genuine connection. A waiter offered him champagne, and Riley accepted the glass, more for something to do with his hands than any desire to drink. The bubbles rose endlessly in the crystal flute, reminding him of his own constant climb to the top. Success had been his only companion for so long, he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to want anything else. The live orchestra played soft classical music, creating a sophisticated backdrop to the mindless chatter around him. Riley checked his watch. He'd give it another hour before making an acceptable exit. These events were necessary evils, opportunities to maintain the right connections and keep his image polished. "But, Mommy, look at the pretty lights." A child's voice, clear and full of wonder, cut through the artificial atmosphere of the gala. Riley turned toward the sound, his eyes landing on a sight that seemed completely out of place in this world of practiced sophistication. A young woman in a simple but elegant blue dress held a small toddler in her arms. The child, a little girl with golden curls, was pointing excitedly at the chandeliers above. "Yes, Lucy, they're beautiful, aren't they?" The mother's voice was warm and genuine, her smile reaching her eyes in a way Riley rarely saw in his social circle. She adjusted her hold on the little girl, who was squirming with excitement. Something about the scene made Riley pause. The mother, he'd later learn her name was Sarah Montgomery, wasn't trying to network or impress anyone. She was completely focused on her daughter's joy, sharing in the child's simple wonder at the world around them. Without conscious thought, Riley found himself moving closer. The little girl, Lucy, noticed him first, offering him a bright, uninhibited smile that caught him off guard. Her mother looked up then, and Riley was struck by the warmth in her brown eyes. "Hello," she said simply, no trace of the usual recognition or calculation he was used to seeing in people's faces. "Hi," Riley responded, surprised by how uncertain his own voice sounded. Lucy was still beaming at him, and something in his chest tightened unexpectedly. "She's very happy." Sarah laughed softly. "Lucy finds joy in everything. It's one of her special talents." Riley watched as Lucy reached out toward the champagne glass in his hand, and Sarah gently redirected her attention. The natural way she handled her daughter, the obvious love between them, stirred something long dormant in Riley's heart. Before he could stop himself, words he never thought he'd say slipped out. May I hold her?" Sarah's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but her smile grew warmer. She studied him for a moment, and Riley felt strangely exposed under her gaze. It was as if she could see past his carefully constructed facade to something he usually kept hidden, even from himself. "Of course," she said softly, and Riley set down his champagne glass, his hands suddenly uncertain as he prepared to hold this small, precious being. Riley sat in his penthouse office, the city lights twinkling below through floor-to-ceiling windows. His laptop screen glowed in the dimness, but the quarterly reports he should have been reviewing remained untouched. Instead, his mind kept wandering back to the charity gala 3 nights ago. He picked up his phone, scrolling through his camera roll to the single photo he'd asked his assistant to take, a casual shot of him holding little Lucy while Sarah stood nearby. The image captured something he couldn't quite explain. Lucy's tiny hand pressed against his chest, her golden curls catching the light, and that pure, innocent smile that made his usual defenses crumble. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, setting the phone face down on his desk. But even as he tried to focus on work, Sarah's warm brown eyes haunted him. The way she'd handled Lucy with such natural grace, her genuine laughter, her complete lack of pretense. It was so different from his world of calculated moves and power plays. Riley stood up, pacing the length of his office. He'd built his empire on logical decisions, on maintaining control. Emotions were messy, unpredictable things that had no place in his life. And yet... "Mr. Daniels?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "I have that information you requested about Sarah Montgomery." "Send it in," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. Moments later, he held a simple manila folder. Sarah Montgomery, single mother, working as an administrative assistant at a small marketing firm. Her salary was modest, barely enough to cover rent and childcare in this city. No criminal record, excellent credit score despite her limited means, and, most notably, no support from Lucy's father. Riley's jaw clenched. He'd grown up with wealth, but he remembered the cold emptiness of his childhood home, the absence of genuine care and affection. Lucy deserved better. Sarah deserved better. "It's just business," he told himself, opening his laptop. "A simple transaction." His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he pulled up his email. He could help them, keep them in his orbit, but maintain a safe distance. Professional boundaries would protect him from these unsettling feelings. The first draft of his email was too formal, the second too personal. On the third attempt, he found the right balance. "Ms. Montgomery, I hope this email finds you well. Our brief interaction at the charity gala left an impression, and I have a proposition that could benefit both of us. I'm offering you a position at Daniels Corp. with a substantial salary increase from your current employment. This would include comprehensive benefits and a flexible schedule to accommodate your childcare needs. Additionally, I'm prepared to establish a trust fund for Lucy's education. In return, I ask for your dedication and discretion. The position would report directly to me, and I believe your unique perspective would be valuable to our organization. Please consider this offer carefully. If you're interested, we can discuss details in person. Regards, Riley Daniels, CEO, Daniels Corporation. His cursor lingered over the send button. Part of him knew this was dangerous. Keeping them close while trying to maintain emotional distance was like playing with fire. But the memory of Lucy's innocent trust, of Sarah's genuine kindness, wouldn't let him walk away. "Just business," he repeated firmly, and clicked send. The email disappeared into cyberspace, and Riley leaned back in his chair, trying to ignore the way his heart raced. He'd given them a chance at a better life while protecting himself behind professional boundaries. It was the perfect solution. Only it didn't feel perfect. It felt like the beginning of something he couldn't control, and that terrified him more than any hostile takeover ever had. Sarah stared at her phone, reading Riley Daniels' email for the 5th time. The glow of the screen illuminated her small living room, where Lucy's toys were neatly stacked in the corner. Her son slept peacefully in the next room, unaware of the life-changing decision his mother faced. The numbers in Riley's offer made her head spin. The salary he proposed was more than triple what she currently made. The thought of not having to count every penny, of being able to give Lucy everything he needed without constant worry, was almost overwhelming. She set her phone down and walked to the kitchen, filling a glass with water. Her reflection in the window showed dark circles under her eyes, testament to long hours juggling work and single parenthood. The dishwasher she'd been meaning to fix for months hummed irregularly in the background, another expense she'd been putting off. "It's too good to be true," she murmured, taking a sip of water. The memory of Riley at the gala surfaced in her mind. He'd been different when holding Lucy, vulnerable, almost human. But she'd heard stories about him, about his ruthless business tactics and cold demeanor. The way he'd phrased the email, like it was a business transaction rather than a job offer, made her uneasy. Her phone buzzed, a text from her best friend, Claire. "Girl, you still up? Need to talk?" Sarah smiled, grateful for Claire's sixth sense when it came to her moods. She quickly typed back, "Can you come over? Lucy's asleep." 20 minutes later, Claire slipped through the front door, carrying 2 cups of coffee from their favorite late-night cafe. She took one look at Sarah's face and said, "Okay, spill." They settled onto Sarah's worn but comfortable couch, and Sarah handed Claire her phone. As Claire read the email, her eyes widened. "Holy, Sarah, this is huge! But wait, isn't this the guy from the gala? The one who asked to hold Lucy?" Sarah nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm coffee cup. "That's him. Riley Daniels, CEO of Daniels Corporation. Worth millions, probably billions. And he wants you to work for him?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "Directly for him?" "That's what the email says." Sarah leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The benefits package alone would change everything. Lucy could have the best health care, the best education. "But," Claire prompted, knowing her friend well enough to hear the hesitation in her voice. "But look at how he wrote it. A proposition that could benefit both of us. Dedication and discretion. It's like he's drafting a business contract, not offering a job." Sarah stood up, pacing the small living room. "And why me? I'm an administrative assistant at a tiny marketing firm. What could I possibly offer his corporation?" Claire took a thoughtful sip of her coffee. "Maybe he saw something in you at the gala. You said he seemed different when he was holding Lucy." "That's another thing," Sarah said, lowering her voice as she passed Lucy's room. "The way he looked at Lucy, it wasn't the usual, 'Oh, what a cute baby' look. It was like he was seeing something else entirely." "Something bad?" "No, not bad. More like recognition? Pain? I don't know." Sarah dropped back onto the couch. "And now this offer out of nowhere." Claire set her coffee down and turned to face Sarah fully. "Okay, let's break this down. Worst case scenario, it's awful, and you quit. Best case scenario, you give Lucy the life you've always dreamed of providing." "It's not that simple," Sarah protested, but Claire cut her off. "Actually, it is. You're the smartest person I know, Sarah. If this turns out to be some weird power play, you'll figure it out and walk away. But can you really pass up this opportunity without at least trying?" Sarah glanced toward Lucy's room, where her son's nightlight cast a gentle glow under the door. She thought about the trust fund Riley mentioned, about never having to worry about medical bills or school supplies or broken dishwashers again. "You're right," she said finally, picking up her phone. "I have to try for Lucy." Sarah's heels clicked against the polished marble floor of Daniels Corporation's lobby. The sound echoed off glass walls and chrome fixtures, making her feel even more conspicuous among the sleek professionals striding purposefully through security. Her simple black dress, though the nicest she owned, felt inadequate next to the designer suits surrounding her. "Ms. Montgomery?" A sharp-featured executive assistant approached her. "I'm Andrea Wells. I'll be showing you to your desk and reviewing protocols." Sarah nodded, gripping her purse tighter. "Thank you. I appreciate the help." Andrea's efficiency was almost mechanical as she led Sarah through a maze of corridors and past rows of identical workstations. "Mr. Daniels expects all support staff to arrive 15 minutes before their scheduled start time. Coffee preferences are logged in the system. He takes his first cup at 7:45 a.m. sharp." The orientation continued at a dizzying pace. Sarah's head spun with information about security clearances, communication protocols, and filing systems. Her desk, she discovered, was positioned just outside Riley's office, a strategic location that made her stomach clench with nerves. "Questions?" Andrea paused, one perfectly shaped eyebrow raised. "No, I think I've got it," Sarah lied, knowing she'd need to review her hastily scribbled notes later. "Good. Mr. Daniels will be in at 7:30. Andrea's heels clicked away, leaving Sarah alone at her desk. Sarah booted up her computer, trying to ignore the whispers from nearby cubicles. She caught fragments of conversation. Single mother? Charity case. What was he thinking? Taking a deep breath, she focused on organizing her workspace. She'd faced worse challenges than office gossip. Lucy's future was worth any temporary discomfort. At exactly 7:30, Riley strode through the office. Sarah stood, coffee already prepared according to the specifications in his file. "Good morning, Mr. Daniels," she said, extending the cup. His eyes flickered over her briefly. "Morning. The Morrison contract needs review by noon. Andrea will share the files." He disappeared into his office without waiting for a response. Sarah's day became a blur of activity. The Morrison contract was massive, filled with complex legal terminology. She threw herself into it, drawing on skills from her previous job to create a comprehensive summary. When other assignments piled up, she worked through lunch, determined to prove herself capable. From his office, Riley watched Sarah through the glass partition. She hadn't moved from her desk in hours, attacking each task with intense focus. When he'd placed her there, it had been partly to keep an eye on his investment, and partly because something about her presence felt steadying. He found himself distracted by small details, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating, how she double-checked everything before sending it forward, her quiet efficiency in handling calls. She was different from his usual employees, lacking their artificial polish but possessing something more valuable: genuine dedication. "The Morrison summary," she said, entering his office after a knock. She placed the document on his desk and turned to leave. "Wait." Riley scanned the first page, then the second. The work was exceptional, clear, thorough, and insightful. "You caught the discrepancy in section 4.3. "Yes, sir. I cross-referenced it with their previous contracts. The language changed substantially." Riley nodded, making a mental note to have legal investigate further. "Good work. Have the quarterly reports on my desk by tomorrow morning." "They're already compiled, sir. I'll bring them in now." He watched her retrieve the reports, noting how she'd anticipated the request. She was proving to be a valuable asset, exactly as he'd hoped. Yet something nagged at him, the same feeling he'd had watching her with Lucy at the gala. He pushed it aside, focusing instead on how he could best utilize her abilities to strengthen his company. Sarah felt his eyes on her as she left his office, but kept her expression neutral. She might feel like an outsider in this glossy corporate world, but she refused to let it show. She had too much riding on this opportunity to fail. Sarah's computer monitor flickered to life as she settled into her morning routine. A small package sat on her desk, a brand new ergonomic keyboard and mouse. Her old ones had been making her wrists ache, though she'd never complained. "Andrea arranged for the upgrades," Riley said as he passed by, not even glancing her way. "Can't have my employees developing carpal tunnel." Sarah touched the package, noting how it was exactly what she needed. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels." He waved dismissively, already focused on his phone. Standard procedure. But Sarah had been there long enough to know it wasn't. None of the other support staff had received new equipment. Still, the gesture felt clinical, like checking off a box on a maintenance list. Throughout the week, similar incidents occurred. A new desk lamp appeared when she'd been squinting at documents. The ancient office chair was replaced with a high-end model. Each time, Riley's response was the same: detached efficiency, as if he were simply maintaining office equipment rather than helping a person. On Wednesday, Sarah found a small mini fridge installed beside her desk. "For lunch storage," Riley explained briskly as he walked past. "The break room is too far. Wastes time." She knew he'd seen her eating granola bars at her desk, trying to maximize her work hours. The fridge would let her bring proper meals, but his reasoning made it sound like pure business optimization. The day had been particularly grueling. A major client had threatened to pull their contract, sending the office into chaos. Sarah had spent hours reorganizing schedules, managing crisis calls, and preparing emergency reports. Her usual bus had long since departed. "Still here?" Riley's voice startled her. He stood in his office doorway, suit jacket draped over his arm. "Just finishing up the contingency plans for tomorrow," Sarah replied, trying to hide her exhaustion. Riley checked his watch, frowning. "It's almost 9. "I know, I'm sorry. I'll have everything ready for the morning meeting." "Who's watching your son?" The question surprised her. "My neighbor. She's very understanding about late nights." Riley's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone, typing quickly. "My driver will take you home." "Oh no, that's not necessary. I can call a cab." "James is already heading up. He'll be here in 2 minutes." Riley's tone left no room for argument. "The Morrison situation is my company's crisis, not yours. Go home to your son." Sarah gathered her things, noting how Riley waited by the elevator until James arrived. The driver was kind-faced and professional, holding the door for her as she entered the sleek company car. Through the tinted windows, she caught a glimpse of Riley watching from the lobby. His expression was unreadable, but something about his stance, the way he remained until the car pulled away, seemed protective rather than supervisory. In the quiet of the car, Sarah reflected on these small moments. Riley's actions were always practical, always justified by business logic, but their timing was too perfect, too aligned with her unspoken needs. It was as though he noticed everything but couldn't, or wouldn't, acknowledge the human element of his attention. She remembered how he'd held Lucy at the gala, that flash of gentleness she'd seen beneath his controlled exterior. Maybe these carefully disguised kindnesses were signs of the same person, someone who cared but didn't know how to show it directly. The car pulled up to her apartment building, and James insisted on waiting until she was safely inside. Another directive from Riley, no doubt, wrapped in the guise of corporate responsibility. Sarah waved goodbye to the driver, her mind still on Riley. His actions today had been different, less calculated, more immediate. For a moment, when he'd asked about Lucy, genuine concern had cracked through his businesslike facade. Riley stood at his office window, watching the city lights flicker in the growing dusk. His reflection stared back at him. Impeccable suit, perfectly styled hair, the mask of success he'd worn for so long. But tonight, something felt different. Off balance. He caught himself checking Sarah's empty desk for the third time that evening. The sight of her vacant chair shouldn't bother him, yet it did. The office felt colder without her presence, her warm smile, the way she hummed softly while working through complex spreadsheets. "Get it together, Daniels," he muttered, turning back to his desk. A stack of acquisition reports awaited his review, but his mind kept wandering to earlier that day. Sarah had brought Lucy to the office briefly during lunch, some issue with the daycare. The toddler's delighted giggle had pierced through his closed door, drawing his attention despite his best efforts to focus on work. He'd watched through the glass walls as Sarah entertained Lucy with paper animals, efficiently multitasking between her son and her duties. The sight had stirred something in him, a longing he couldn't name, didn't want to acknowledge. Running his hands through his hair, Riley loosened his tie. The gesture felt like surrender. He'd built his empire on control, on keeping everyone at arm's length. Emotions were messy, unpredictable. They had no place in his carefully constructed world. Yet Sarah had somehow slipped past his defenses. Not with grand gestures or demands, but with small moments of genuine kindness, the way she remembered everyone's coffee preferences, how she left encouraging sticky notes on difficult project files, her quiet competence that made everything run smoother. It's just professional appreciation, he told himself. But the words rang hollow. Professional appreciation didn't explain why he'd memorized the sound of her footsteps, or why he found himself looking forward to their brief morning meetings. His phone buzzed. A message from James, his driver, confirming Sarah had made it home safely. Riley caught himself smiling before he could stop it. When had he started caring about these details? Across the office, Sarah's computer screen still glowed softly. She'd been working on the Morrison crisis, going above and beyond what her position required. Her insights had been invaluable, spotting patterns in the client's behavior that even his senior analysts had missed. Sarah was proving herself more capable than he'd anticipated. In just a few months, she'd grown from a basic support role to handling complex business strategies. Other employees had started coming to her for guidance, drawn to her natural leadership and problem-solving abilities. Riley sat heavily in his chair, admitting what he'd been avoiding. Sarah Montgomery was becoming indispensable, not just to the company, but to him personally. The thought terrified him. Across town, Sarah was settling into a new routine. Lucy was asleep, giving her time to review some work documents. Her promotion to junior analyst had come with increased responsibilities, but she welcomed the challenge. The company culture was shifting, subtle changes that seemed to ripple out from her department. More collaboration, less cutthroat competition. Even Riley's notorious temper had mellowed, though he maintained his distance. But something about Riley's behavior nagged at her. His carefully constructed facade had cracks, moments when she caught him watching her with an unguarded expression, quickly masked when noticed. His explanations for his kindnesses were becoming more elaborate, as if he needed to justify them to himself. Sarah closed her laptop, thinking about the complexity of the man who'd changed her life. He wasn't the cold-hearted CEO she'd first assumed, but neither was he the caring person she sometimes glimpsed beneath the surface. The truth lay somewhere in between, and that uncertainty made her wary. She'd learned to navigate his moods, to read the subtle signs of his approval or displeasure. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was seeing only what he allowed her to see. The real Riley Daniels remained hidden, and until she understood him better, she would keep her guard up. The morning headlines hit Riley's desk like physical blows. Daniels Corp stock plummets. Market volatility threatens tech giant. Competitors circle as Daniels Corp struggles. His jaw clenched as he scanned through the reports, each one worse than the last. The quarterly numbers were abysmal. Their main competitor, TechVision, had launched a revolutionary product line that made Riley's latest innovation seem outdated. 3 major clients had already jumped ship, and whispers of more following suit echoed through the industry. "Get me the department heads. Now," Riley barked into his intercom. His hands shook slightly as he reached for his coffee, spilling a few drops onto his pristine desk. He quickly wiped them away, trying to maintain the illusion of control. The boardroom filled with tense executives, their faces drawn with worry. Riley stood at the head of the table, his presence usually commanding respect. But today there was an edge of desperation in his stance. "Our Q3 projections are down 40%, he began, his voice tight. "TechVision is eating into our market share. We're hemorrhaging clients." He slammed his hand on the table, making several people jump. "How did we miss this?" Sarah watched from her position near the back of the room, noting how Riley's shoulders were rigid with tension. She'd never seen him this rattled before. His usual calculated demeanor had cracked, revealing the pressure he was under. The meeting devolved into finger-pointing and excuses. Marketing blamed R&D for slow development cycles. R&D cited budget constraints. Finance pointed to market instability. Through it all, Riley's expression grew darker. "Enough!" he finally shouted, silencing the room. "I want solutions on my desk by tomorrow morning. Anyone who can't deliver can clean out their office now." As people filed out, Sarah noticed Riley's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. She lingered, wanting to say something, but he stormed past her without a glance. Throughout the day, the tension in the office became unbearable. Riley's door remained closed as a parade of worried executives came and went. Each emergence looked more defeated than the last. Sarah tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting to the stack of financial reports she'd been reviewing. There were patterns there, something she couldn't quite grasp yet. The market shift wasn't just about TechVision's new product line. There was more to it. By afternoon, news of layoffs in other departments started circulating. The usually bustling office grew quiet, everyone working with their heads down, trying to avoid attention. Sarah watched as Riley paced in his office, phone pressed to his ear, his gestures becoming increasingly agitated. When the stock dropped another 5%, Riley's frustration finally boiled over. He emerged from his office like a storm cloud, heading toward the R&D department. Sarah winced at the shouting that followed. "We're 6 months behind schedule," Riley's voice carried through the floor. 6 months, while our competitors are leaving us in the dust." He returned to his office, slamming the door so hard the glass walls shuddered. Sarah could see him through the transparent panels, running his hands through his hair, his perfect composure completely shattered. Looking around at her colleagues' worried faces, Sarah felt a determination growing inside her. She pulled up the company's financial records, market analyses, and competitor reports. There had to be a solution, a way through this crisis that nobody else had seen yet. As the office slowly emptied for the day, Sarah remained at her desk, her mind working through possibilities. Riley was still in his office, tie loosened, jacket discarded, staring at his computer screen with hollow eyes. The weight of responsibility seemed to be crushing him. She opened a new document and began typing, organizing her thoughts. The company needed more than just damage control. It needed a complete strategic overhaul. Sarah knew she was overstepping her position, but she couldn't stand by and watch everything fall apart. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as ideas began to take shape. Riley might not want her help, might not even look at her suggestions, but she had to try. The company's future, and the livelihoods of hundreds of employees, depended on someone finding a way out of this crisis. Sarah stared at her computer screen, the soft glow illuminating her determined face in the dim office. It was well past midnight, but she couldn't stop working. She had discovered a pattern in the market data that everyone else had missed. While their competitors were pushing flashy new products, they were neglecting an entire segment of small business clients, a segment that made up nearly 30% of the industry's revenue. She glanced through the glass walls at Riley's empty office. Earlier that day, he'd stormed out after another tense board meeting, leaving behind a wake of demoralized employees. Taking a deep breath, Sarah opened her email and created a new account under a generic department name. She began sending carefully crafted proposals to the department heads, signing them as part of an internal strategy team. Over the next few weeks, Sarah worked double time. During the day, she maintained her regular duties, but at night, she orchestrated a silent revolution. She redirected resources to develop solutions for the neglected small business market, working through proper channels but keeping her identity hidden behind committee names and department signatures. "These projections look promising," she overheard one executive say to another as they passed her desk. "Maybe we're not done for after all." The first sign of improvement came when a mid-sized tech firm signed a new contract. Then another followed. Sarah had identified their pain points and crafted solutions that fit their budgets perfectly. The bleeding of clients slowly began to stop. During a department meeting, Riley looked less haggard than he had in weeks. "Our small business division shows a 12% increase," he announced, studying the reports. "Who's responsible for this initiative?" The department heads exchanged confused looks. Each had received different pieces of the strategy through various channels, but no one could pinpoint its origin. Sarah kept her eyes on her notebook, heart pounding. "Whatever it is, keep it going," Riley ordered, something like hope flickering in his eyes for the first time in months. Sarah worked late again that night, coordinating with the R&D team through her anonymous email account. She'd identified ways to modify their existing products for smaller clients, requiring minimal additional development costs. The solutions were already in their arsenal. They just needed someone to connect the dots. 2 more weeks passed, and the company's stock price began to stabilize. Sarah continued her behind-the-scenes work, carefully maintaining her anonymity. She redirected marketing resources, streamlined operations, and found ways to cut costs without sacrificing quality. Each decision was strategic, implemented through proper channels but always under the guise of different department initiatives. During a morning briefing, Riley actually smiled, a sight so rare it caused several employees to do double takes. "Our Q4 projections are showing improvement," he announced. "The small business strategy is working. We've secured 15 new contracts this month alone." His eyes swept the room, landing briefly on Sarah. "Montgomery, I want you to look into these numbers. See if you can spot any patterns we can exploit." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied quietly, fighting to keep her expression neutral. She already knew exactly what patterns he was seeing. She'd created them. The atmosphere in the office began to shift. The heavy cloud of doom lifted slightly, replaced by cautious optimism. Sarah watched as Riley started taking more lunch breaks, his shoulders losing some of their tension. He began stopping by her desk more frequently, asking for her input on various projects. "There's something different about these reports," he said one afternoon, leaning against her desk. "They're more comprehensive, more strategic." He studied her face. "You have good instincts, Montgomery. I want you more involved in our planning sessions." Sarah nodded, keeping her expression professional despite the warm flutter in her chest. "Thank you, sir. I'm happy to help however I can." As Riley walked away, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The company was far from safe, but they were moving in the right direction. She opened her anonymous email account and began drafting her next set of proposals. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, she was content knowing that her silent efforts were making a difference. Riley stood at his office window, watching the city lights flicker in the early evening darkness. His reflection stared back at him, impeccable suit, perfectly styled hair, the very image of control. But lately, that control felt like it was slipping through his fingers. He ran his hand through his hair, messing up its careful arrangement. The company's improved numbers should have been his only focus, but his thoughts kept drifting to Sarah. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she concentrated. How her eyes lit up when she talked about Lucy. The quiet confidence she carried herself with. "Get it together, Daniels," he muttered, turning away from the window. His desk was covered with reports, all showing positive trends he couldn't quite explain. The company was stabilizing, but the reason remained elusive. A knock at his door made him straighten. "Come in." Sarah entered, holding another stack of reports. "The latest numbers from the small business division, Mr. Daniels." "Riley," he corrected automatically, then immediately regretted it. Using first names created familiarity. Familiarity led to attachment. Attachment led to vulnerability. She paused, a slight flush coloring her cheeks. "Riley," she amended. "The new client retention rates are exceeding expectations." He gestured for her to sit, noting how she moved with quiet grace. "Walk me through it." As Sarah explained the figures, Riley found himself watching her hands as they moved through the air, emphasizing points. Her wedding ring was conspicuously absent, had been since the day he met her. He caught himself wondering about her past, about the story behind Lucy's father, then forced his attention back to the numbers. "The strategy is solid," she was saying. "We just need to maintain this momentum." Riley nodded, but his mind was already wandering to the charity gala where they'd first met. The way she'd looked at him when he'd asked to hold Lucy. Surprised, but not judgmental. No one ever looked at him like that anymore. "Is everything all right?" Sarah's voice cut through his thoughts. "Fine," he said shortly, standing up. Distance. He needed distance. "That'll be all, Montgomery." He saw the flash of hurt in her eyes before she masked it with professionalism. "Of course, Mr. Daniels." The return to his surname was deliberate, and it stung more than it should have. After she left, Riley paced his office. This wasn't part of the plan. Sarah was supposed to be an employee, nothing more. The fact that his chest tightened when she smiled wasn't supposed to happen. The way he looked forward to their meetings wasn't part of the equation. From his window, he watched Sarah leave the building later that evening. She paused to help an intern who'd dropped their files, taking time to gather papers despite clearly being in a hurry. That was Sarah, always helping, always caring, always making him question his carefully constructed walls. Meanwhile, Sarah gathered her things at her desk, trying not to analyze Riley's hot and cold behavior. One moment he was asking her to call him by his first name. The next he was dismissing her like a stranger. She'd seen the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her sometimes, only for it to be replaced by that familiar distance. She thought about the way he'd been earlier, distracted, almost vulnerable. It was such a contrast to his usual sharp focus that it made her wonder what was going on behind those carefully guarded eyes. She'd caught him watching her several times today, his expression unreadable. Driving home, Sarah couldn't help but remember how his voice had softened when he'd said, "Riley." For just a moment, the mask had slipped, revealing something raw and real underneath. But then the walls had come back up, higher than ever. She sighed, knowing she needed to keep things professional. Her job was too important to risk on whatever this was becoming. Lucy needed stability, and Riley Daniels was anything but stable when it came to emotions. Still, as she pulled into her driveway, Sarah couldn't quite shake the memory of his eyes when he'd looked at her today. Lost, searching, almost afraid. It made her wonder what had happened to make him so afraid of letting anyone close. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the conference room windows as the board members filed out. Riley remained seated at the head of the table, loosening his tie while reviewing the meeting notes. Sarah gathered her papers slowly, sensing his uncharacteristic hesitation to leave. "That went better than expected," Riley said quietly, breaking the silence. His shoulders relaxed slightly as he looked up at her. Sarah nodded, sliding into a chair closer to him. The investors seemed pleased with the recovery strategy. They should be. He ran a hand through his dark hair, messing up its usual perfect style. "The numbers don't lie. We've managed to turn things around faster than anyone predicted." Sarah's heart picked up speed. She'd spent countless nights analyzing market trends, restructuring departments, and implementing changes through carefully placed suggestions to department heads, all while making sure Riley believed the ideas came from his team. "The company has good bones," she said carefully. "Sometimes all it takes is a fresh perspective." Riley studied her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You've been invaluable these past few months, Sarah. Your insights—" He paused, struggling with the words. "I've never had someone understand the business quite like you do." The praise, though genuine, made Sarah's stomach twist with guilt. If he only knew how deeply involved she'd been in saving his company, would he still look at her with such admiration? Or would his pride turn that look to betrayal? "I just try to do my job well," she said softly. "No." Riley shook his head. "It's more than that. You see things differently. You understand people in a way I never could." His voice dropped lower, more personal. "Sometimes I wonder if I've been doing this all wrong, running the company like it's just numbers and assets." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she straightened her papers. This vulnerable version of Riley was harder to resist than his usual controlled demeanor. "There's nothing wrong with being thorough and analytical," she offered. "But there's more to it, isn't there?" He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "The way you handle situations, how you consider the human element, it's changing how I think about business." The weight of her secret pressed heavily on her chest. Here was Riley, finally opening up, showing genuine appreciation for her contributions, and she couldn't even be honest about how much she'd really done. "I learned early on that success isn't just about profit margins," she said. "It's about building something sustainable, something that matters." Riley's expression softened. "Like what you've built with Lucy, a foundation of trust and care." He looked down at his hands. "I never had that growing up. Everything was about performance, about proving my worth through achievements." Sarah's heart ached at the pain hidden beneath his words. She wanted to reach out, to tell him that he was worth more than his business success, that she saw the good man beneath his carefully constructed facade. Instead, she kept her hands folded in her lap. "It's never too late to build something different," she said gently. Riley met her eyes, and for a moment, the space between them felt charged with unspoken possibilities. Then he straightened, his professional mask sliding back into place. "The board meeting went well. That's what matters." Sarah recognized the retreat, the way he pulled back whenever emotions threatened to overwhelm him. She gathered her things, knowing their moment of connection was over. Her decision to continue working behind the scenes felt heavier now, weighted with the knowledge that every success she achieved in secret was another barrier to the trust they could have shared. As she walked to her office, Sarah felt the familiar strain of her double life. Every praise from Riley, every moment of genuine connection, was tainted by the knowledge that she wasn't being completely honest with him. But the alternative, watching his company fail when she knew she could help, wasn't something she could live with either. Riley's footsteps echoed through the empty hallway as he headed towards the conference room for some last-minute preparation before tomorrow's board meeting. The late hour meant most employees had gone home, leaving the office quiet except for the occasional hum of the cleaning crew. He paused when he heard voices drifting from the break room. "Sarah's strategic reorganization of the supply chain saved us millions," someone said. "Mark from accounting," Riley recognized. "Without her stepping in when she did, we'd probably be filing for bankruptcy right now." Riley froze, his hand gripping the doorframe. "I know," another voice agreed. "Jessica from operations." The way she restructured the Asian markets while keeping Riley focused on domestic operations was brilliant. He had no idea she was the one pulling the strings. The blood rushed from Riley's face. He stood there, paralyzed, as the conversation continued. "She basically ran the company through all of us," Mark said, feeding suggestions through different departments so Riley wouldn't catch on. "I've never seen anything like it." Riley's chest tightened. The recovery he'd attributed to his leadership team's efforts, the turnaround he'd been privately congratulating himself for managing. It had all been Sarah? He turned sharply, his polished shoes squeaking against the floor as he strode toward Sarah's office. The warm glow from her desk lamp spilled into the hallway. Of course she was still here, probably orchestrating more behind-the-scenes maneuvers he knew nothing about. Sarah looked up as he entered, her reading glasses perched on her nose, papers spread across her desk. The sight of her, so capable, so unassuming, made his anger flare. "Were you ever going to tell me?" His voice came out harder than he intended. Sarah's expression shifted from surprise to understanding, then resignation. She removed her glasses slowly. "You found out." "Found out." Riley's laugh was bitter. "I had to overhear it from the break room gossip. How long have you been running my company behind my back?" "I wasn't running it behind your back," Sarah said calmly, though her hands trembled slightly as she stood. "I was trying to save it. By going around me? By manipulating my entire staff to keep me in the dark?" He paced in front of her desk, running his hands through his hair. "Do you have any idea how this makes me look? How it makes me feel?" "I did what needed to be done," Sarah said, her voice firm despite her obvious nervousness. "The company was failing, Riley. You were so focused on maintaining control that you couldn't see the bigger picture." "So you took control instead?" He stopped pacing to stare at her. "Made me look like a fool who couldn't manage his own business?" "No." Sarah came around the desk, facing him directly. "I used my skills to help a company I've come to care about, to help people whose livelihoods depend on this business, to help you." The sincerity in her voice made his anger falter. "Why didn't you just come to me?" "Would you have listened?" she challenged. "Really listened? Or would you have dismissed my ideas because they came from someone you saw as just another employee?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He thought about how he'd treated her initially, as someone to be managed, controlled through financial support. When had she become so much more than that? "Show me," he said finally, his voice rough. "Show me everything you did." Sarah nodded, retrieving a folder from her desk drawer. As she spread out documents showing months of carefully orchestrated changes, strategic decisions, and brilliant market analyses, Riley felt his world shift on its axis. "The Asian market expansion?" he asked, recognizing a particularly successful initiative. "My idea," she confirmed, "implemented through the regional directors." "The supply chain restructuring?" "Also mine. The cost savings helped stabilize our cash flow during the worst months." Riley sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the scope of her involvement. Everything he'd attributed to his team's expertise, every success he'd claimed as his own, all of it traced back to Sarah. "Why?" he asked, looking up at her. "Why go to all this trouble and let me take the credit?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Because sometimes leadership isn't about who gets the credit. It's about doing what needs to be done, regardless of recognition." Riley stood at the window of his office, watching the city lights flicker in the darkness. The weight of Sarah's revelation, and his own reaction to it, pressed heavily on his chest. He turned to face her, still standing by his desk with the evidence of her brilliance spread before them. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice rough. "Not just for my reaction earlier, but for everything." Sarah watched him carefully, her expression guarded. The space between them felt charged with unspoken words. "I've been thinking about why I didn't see what you were doing," he continued, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Why I couldn't see you." He paused, struggling with words that had never come easily to him. "The truth is, I've spent my entire life keeping people at arm's length." He moved away from the window, needing to move, to do something with the restless energy coursing through him. "My parents, they were never really there. Oh, they provided everything material I could want, but emotional support?" He gave a bitter laugh. "That wasn't part of the deal. Success was the only currency that mattered." Sarah's expression softened, but she remained silent, giving him space to continue. "I learned early that letting people in meant giving them power over you. So I built walls, made everything transactional." He stopped pacing, looking directly at her. "Even with you, especially with you." "The financial support," Sarah said quietly. "Yes." Riley's shoulders slumped. "I thought if I could keep it businesslike, keep it under control." He shook his head. "But you didn't stay in the neat little box I tried to put you in, did you?" Sarah's lips curved slightly. "I've never been good at staying in boxes." "No, you haven't." He moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her eyes. "You saved my company. You saw what needed to be done and you did it, regardless of how it might affect you personally. And He swallowed hard. "I've never met anyone like you." "Riley," Sarah started, but he held up a hand. "Please, let me finish. I need to say this." He took a deep breath. "I've never allowed myself to feel anything real for anyone. Every relationship I've had has been superficial, controlled. Because the alternative?" His voice cracked slightly. "The alternative terrified me." "What alternative?" Sarah asked softly. "Caring. Really caring. Opening myself up to the possibility of being hurt or abandoned or—" He gestured helplessly. "Or finding out I'm not enough. That I'm just as worthless as I always feared I was." Sarah took a step toward him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You're not worthless, Riley." "Aren't I?" His laugh was hollow. "I couldn't even see what was happening in my own company. I was so wrapped up in my own pride, my own fear, that I missed everything that mattered. I missed you." The silence between them was heavy with emotion. Sarah stood there, her heart racing, trying to process everything he was saying. She'd seen glimpses of his vulnerability before, but this raw honesty was something entirely new. "I think," Riley said slowly, "I've been falling for you for months, but I couldn't admit it, couldn't face it, because admitting it meant risking everything I've spent my life protecting myself against." Sarah felt her breath catch. She could see the cost of this confession in every line of his body, in the tension of his shoulders, in the way his hands clenched at his sides. This was Riley Daniels stripped bare of his usual armor, offering her his truth with trembling hands. And it terrified her, because she'd been falling too, despite her best efforts to keep things professional. She'd fallen for the glimpses of kindness she'd seen beneath his cold exterior, for the brilliant mind that could keep pace with her own, for the man she'd watched him becoming. But could she trust this transformation? Could she risk her heart, her future, her son's future, on the hope that this vulnerability was real and lasting? The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Riley's office, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. Sarah sat across from him, her tablet in hand, running through the latest quarterly projections. The numbers were good, excellent even, but the atmosphere between them felt thick with unspoken words. "The Asian market expansion is proceeding ahead of schedule," Sarah reported, her voice professional and detached. She'd perfected this tone over the past few weeks, using it like a shield. "We're looking at a 15% increase in revenue by next quarter." Riley nodded, his attention seemingly fixed on the papers before him. But Sarah noticed how his fingers tapped restlessly against his desk, how his shoulders remained rigid with tension. Since his confession, he'd retreated into himself, barely making eye contact during their meetings. "That's good work," he managed, still not looking up. The praise felt hollow, mechanical. Sarah pressed her lips together, fighting back a sigh. The distance between them had become a tangible thing, growing wider with each passing day. Where once there had been moments of connection, now there was only awkward silence and stilted conversations. During meetings, Riley would position himself as far from her as possible, taking calls or answering emails while she presented. His responses became increasingly terse, his feedback limited to single-word answers. It was as if he was trying to erase their moment of vulnerability by building his walls even higher. Back in her office, Sarah stared at her computer screen, the words blurring before her eyes. She thought about the way Riley had opened up to her, how raw and honest he'd been. But instead of bringing them closer, his confession had created a chasm. He seemed almost ashamed of having revealed so much of himself, retreating into the cold, calculating businessman she'd first met. During lunch, she watched him from across the cafeteria, sitting alone with his phone, barely touching his food. The other employees gave him a wide berth, sensing his mood. Sarah remembered how, just a few weeks ago, he'd sometimes join her for lunch, their conversations flowing easily as they discussed everything from business strategies to Lucy's latest adventures. "You okay?" her assistant, Jenny, asked, noticing her distraction. Sarah forced a smile. "Just thinking about some reports." But it wasn't reports occupying her thoughts. It was the way Riley's eyes would dart away whenever she entered a room, how he'd schedule meetings through his assistant rather than calling her directly, how he'd stopped asking about Lucy altogether. The afternoon dragged on, filled with endless meetings and conference calls. In each one, Riley maintained his distance, speaking only when necessary, his responses clipped and formal. Sarah found herself second-guessing every decision, every suggestion, wondering if she'd somehow mishandled everything. By evening, as she packed up her belongings, Sarah felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She loved her work, had poured her heart into saving this company, but the emotional toll was becoming unbearable. The constant tension, the careful dance of avoidance, the way Riley's retreat into himself made her question every interaction. It was exhausting. Looking around her office, at the family photo on her desk showing her and Lucy at the park, Sarah felt a surge of clarity. She couldn't continue like this. The stress was affecting her work, her home life, her peace of mind. Lucy had noticed her mother's distraction, asking why she seemed sad all the time. Sarah pulled out her laptop and began drafting an email to herself, listing pros and cons of staying at the company. Under pros, she wrote about the financial security, the challenging work, the difference she was making. Under cons, she listed the emotional strain, the uncomfortable work environment, the way Riley's behavior was affecting her confidence and mental well-being. As she stared at the lists, Sarah realized that maybe it was time to consider other options. She had proven herself capable of turning around a struggling company. Surely other opportunities would present themselves. Perhaps leaving would be better than watching everything she'd built with Riley crumble under the weight of unresolved emotions and retreating hearts. Sarah closed her laptop, her chest tight with the weight of her contemplation. Tomorrow, she decided, she would start looking at other job opportunities. Sometimes, preserving one's peace meant knowing when to walk away. The morning sun cast long shadows across Riley's office as he stared at the latest financial reports. His hands trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup, leaving a ring on the pristine desk surface. The numbers before him painted a grim picture. Another major client was threatening to pull out, and their stock had dropped 15% overnight. He pressed his intercom. "Sarah, can you come in here?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying his composure. When Sarah entered, she noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the way his usually immaculate suit was slightly wrinkled. She maintained her professional distance, standing near the door rather than taking her usual seat across from him. "We're losing Henderson Corp," Riley said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "They're claiming our recent restructuring has affected service quality." Sarah's mind immediately began calculating solutions, but she hesitated. The wall between them felt almost physical now. Every interaction was clouded by unspoken words and careful avoidance. "What do you need from me?" she asked carefully, keeping her tone neutral. Riley looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time in days. The vulnerability there made her heart clench. I need your insight, your honest opinion. What should we do?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably. How could she be honest when they couldn't even have a real conversation anymore? "There are several options we could explore," she began diplomatically. "But first, we need to address the internal communication issues that led to this situation." "Internal communication issues?" Riley's laugh was hollow. "Is that what we're calling it now?" The tension in the room thickened. They both knew she wasn't just talking about business operations. Sarah took a deep breath. "The company is struggling because decisions are being made in isolation. There's no true collaboration anymore." She paused, gathering courage. "You've shut everyone out, Riley, including me." Riley stood abruptly, pacing behind his desk. "I haven't shut anyone out. I'm trying to protect this company, to protect—" He stopped himself, turning to stare out the window. "To protect what?" Sarah pressed, taking a step forward. Before Riley could answer, his phone buzzed. The color drained from his face as he read the message. "The board is calling an emergency meeting. His voice faltered. "They're discussing a vote of no confidence." Sarah watched as Riley's carefully constructed facade began to crack. His hands gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles white with tension. The mighty CEO, who'd built his empire through sheer force of will, looked suddenly young and lost. "I can't lose this company," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "It's all I have. It's all I've ever had." The raw pain in his voice made Sarah forget their careful distance. She moved closer, instinctively reaching out before catching herself. "Everything I've worked for." Riley's voice grew increasingly desperate. "My whole life I've pushed people away because this company came first, and now—" He looked at Sarah, his eyes wild with fear. "I'm losing it anyway, and I'm losing." His voice broke completely. Sarah watched as the man who'd never shown weakness sank into his chair, head in his hands. "I'm losing you too, aren't I?" The words were barely audible, but they filled the room like thunder. "I pushed you away because I was afraid of needing you, and now I'm going to lose everything anyway." Sarah stood frozen, watching Riley's shoulders shake with silent sobs. The carefully maintained professional distance between them crumbled in the face of his raw vulnerability. The mighty CEO was gone. replaced by a man terrified of losing the only things that had ever mattered to him, his company, and perhaps something more. The board meeting notification chimed on both their phones, breaking the heavy silence. Riley looked up at Sarah, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate, silently pleading for help, for understanding, for something more than the cold professional relationship they'd retreated into. Riley stared at the conference room screen, his jaw clenched tight. The quarterly projections flickered before him, each negative number feeling like a personal attack. The board members' concerned murmurs filled the room, but he barely heard them over the rushing in his ears. "We need to take immediate action," one board member insisted. "The Henderson account—" "I'll handle it," Riley snapped, cutting through the tension. His fingers drummed against the polished table. "I'm selling our tech division." The room fell silent. Sarah, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up sharply. "The tech division?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. "That's our most promising growth sector." "It's also our biggest drain right now," Riley countered, avoiding her gaze. "We can get quick capital, stabilize our position." "With all due respect," Sarah interjected, "that division is projected to triple its value within 18 months. If we sell now—" "I've made my decision." Riley's voice was ice cold, the same tone he'd used in countless boardrooms before. But his hands were shaking slightly as he gathered his papers. "Make it happen by end of day." Sarah watched him stride out of the conference room, leaving stunned silence in his wake. She knew this wasn't just about business. This was Riley panicking, making decisions from a place of fear rather than strategy. Back in her office, Sarah immediately began damage control. She pulled up the tech division's complete portfolio, analyzing each project's potential. Her screen filled with spreadsheets and market projections as she worked through lunch, barely noticing when the sky outside turned dark. "Ms. Montgomery?" Her assistant poked her head in. "Mr. Daniels has already signed the preliminary paperwork for the sale. They're moving forward tomorrow morning." Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd hoped to have more time to present an alternative solution. Running her hands through her hair, she made a decision. She began making calls to her network of industry contacts, carefully laying groundwork to minimize the damage of Riley's hasty decision. Meanwhile, Riley sat alone in his office, staring at the signed paperwork. The weight of what he'd done was starting to sink in. He'd acted out of fear, something he'd sworn never to do. But the thought of losing everything, the company, his reputation, Sarah, had pushed him over the edge. 3 days later, the tech division sale made headlines, but not in the way Riley had intended. The buyer, sensing desperation, had lowered their offer significantly at the last minute. The company's stock took another hit, and whispers of Riley's questionable judgment began circulating through the industry. Sarah worked tirelessly behind the scenes, negotiating with key clients and reassuring investors. She arranged for several of the tech division's most promising projects to be temporarily housed within other departments, preserving their potential for future development. Her network of industry relationships proved invaluable as she carefully constructed safety nets that Riley couldn't see. Riley retreated further into himself with each passing day. His office door remained closed, blinds drawn. The few employees who caught glimpses of him reported that he looked haggard, unfocused. The confident CEO who once commanded every room he entered now seemed to be drowning in self-doubt. Sarah felt the strain of carrying both her own responsibilities and the weight of keeping the company afloat. Dark circles appeared under her eyes, and her usual warm smile became rare. Every time she passed Riley's office, she felt a pang in her chest, remembering the vulnerable moment they'd shared before everything fell apart. One evening, as Sarah worked late finalizing a strategy to recover from the tech division sale, she caught sight of Riley through his office window. He stood alone, staring out at the city lights, his shoulders slumped in defeat. For a moment she almost went to him, almost reached out to bridge the growing chasm between them. But the memory of his cold dismissal in the conference room held her back. Instead, she turned back to her computer, diving into another spreadsheet, another solution, another attempt to save the company that was slowly breaking both their hearts. Riley sat in his darkened office, the city lights twinkling beyond his window like distant stars. The emptiness of the space around him matched the hollowness in his chest. On his desk, financial reports lay scattered, each one a testament to his recent failures. But for once, he wasn't looking at the numbers. Instead, his eyes fixed on a small photo frame that had fallen face down during one of his frustrated outbursts. He picked it up, wiping the dust away with his thumb. It was from the charity gala where he'd first met Sarah. Someone had captured the moment he held Lucy, and Sarah's warm smile as she watched him. His throat tightened. That night felt like a lifetime ago, before he'd let his fears poison everything he touched. "What are you so afraid of?" he whispered to his reflection in the window. The question hung in the air, heavy with years of maintained distance and careful control. He thought about his childhood, about parents who measured love in achievements and success in dollar signs. Every memory was tainted with the fear of not being enough, of being abandoned if he failed to meet expectations. He'd built his entire life around proving his worth through business success, keeping everyone at arm's length to protect himself. But what had it gotten him? An empty office, a crumbling company, and the growing certainty that he'd pushed away the one person who saw beyond his carefully constructed facade. Riley pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails from the past few weeks. Sarah's name appeared repeatedly, detailed analyses, strategic suggestions, careful attempts to guide him away from his rash decisions. She'd been trying to help him all along, even when he'd shut her out. His hands trembled as he reached for his desk phone. "Janet," he called his assistant, "could you ask Sarah to come to my office?" "Sir, it's past 9. "Is she still here?" A pause. "Yes, she's in her office." Of course she was. While he'd been wallowing in self-pity, she'd been working to save what he'd nearly destroyed. Minutes later, a soft knock echoed through his office. Sarah stood in the doorway, her expression guarded. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion, but her spine was straight, her chin lifted, ready for another battle. "Sarah," Riley's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat. "Please, sit down." She moved carefully to the chair across from his desk, her movements measured and defensive. The distance between them felt like miles. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, forcing himself to maintain eye contact despite the urge to look away. "About why I make the decisions I make, about why I keep people at a distance." Sarah's expression softened slightly, but she remained silent. "The truth is," Riley continued, his hands clasped tightly together, "I'm terrified. I've spent my entire life trying to prove I'm worth something by building this company, by being successful. But when things started falling apart, I realized success means nothing if you're alone." He stood up, walking to the window. "When I first met you at the gala, something changed. The way you cared for Lucy, the warmth you showed. It scared me because it made me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need." Turning back to face her, Riley's voice grew stronger. "I've been pushing you away because I'm afraid of how much I need you, not just for the company, but—" He swallowed hard. "For me." Sarah's professional mask cracked slightly, surprise flickering across her features. "I know I've made mistakes," Riley continued, "massive ones. But I want to change. I want to learn to trust, to be vulnerable. I want to be worthy of your trust again." He moved closer to her chair, his voice softening. "I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be different. that I can be better. Sarah studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Why should I believe you? She asked quietly. How do I know this isn't just another business strategy? Riley knelt beside her chair, meeting her gaze at eye level. Because for the first time in my life, I'm terrified of losing something more important than money or success. I'm terrified of losing you. Riley stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, watching the early morning sun paint the city skyline in shades of gold. The weight of the decision he'd made during his sleepless night pressed heavily on his shoulders, but for the first time in weeks, he felt strangely at peace. He turned as Sarah entered his office, looking professional in her navy blazer, though exhaustion still lingered in her eyes. She'd been working late into the night again, trying to salvage what they could of the company's latest crisis. You wanted to see me? She asked, her voice careful, measured. Riley nodded, gesturing for her to sit. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the company's future. He paused, gathering his thoughts. About my future. Sarah sat straight-backed in her chair, her expression guarded. After his emotional confession the day before, things between them felt raw, uncertain. I've realized something, Riley continued, moving to sit on the edge of his desk, closer to her. I'm not the right person to lead this company anymore. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. What are you talking about? My pride, my fear of vulnerability, they've nearly destroyed everything I've built. He ran a hand through his dark hair, disheveled from his restless night. But you, Sarah, you've been quietly holding everything together. You understand what this company needs better than I do. He reached for a folder on his desk, handling it with careful deliberation. These are the papers to transfer CEO responsibilities to you. Sarah's mouth fell open. Riley, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. He opened the folder, revealing the documents inside. You have the vision, the compassion, and the strength to lead this company in a way I never could. Sarah stood up abruptly, pacing across the office. This is your company. You built it from nothing. You can't just... That's exactly why I have to do this, Riley interrupted, following her. I built this company focusing only on profit margins and power. You've shown me there's a better way. He gestured to the window, to the city beyond. You see the human element I've always missed. You understand that success isn't just about numbers, it's about people. Sarah turned to face him, her expression a mix of disbelief and uncertainty. And what would you do? I'd stay on as a strategic advisor, Riley said, his voice softening. Working alongside you, learning from you. The company needs your leadership, Sarah, but... He swallowed hard. I need you too, in whatever capacity you'll have me. Sarah's eyes searched his face, looking for any trace of doubt or manipulation. Finding none, she walked slowly back to his desk, picking up the folder with trembling hands. This isn't just about us, she said quietly, leafing through the papers. This is about hundreds of employees, their families, their futures. I know, Riley nodded. That's exactly why it has to be you. You've never lost sight of that, even when I did. Sarah sat down heavily in the chair, still staring at the documents. You're really serious about this? Completely. Riley knelt beside her chair, much like he had the day before. I trust you, Sarah. With the company, with everything. I should have trusted you long ago. Sarah's fingers traced the lines on the paper, her mind clearly racing with possibilities. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up at him, her eyes clear and determined. Okay, she said softly. I'll do it. But I need your word that you're committed to this, to really changing, to really supporting me. Riley reached out, carefully taking her free hand in his. You have my word. No more masks, no more walls, just trust, partnership, and whatever else you're willing to give me a chance to build with you." Sarah squeezed his hand gently, then reached for the pen on his desk. With steady hands, she signed her name on the dotted line, accepting not just the leadership of the company, but the profound change it represented in both their lives. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the CEO's office, Sarah's office now. She stood at the threshold, taking in the space that had been Riley's sanctuary for so long. The sleek, modern furniture and minimalist decor spoke volumes about his leadership style. Efficient, cold, detached. "We should brighten this up a bit," she murmured, more to herself than to Riley, who stood quietly beside her. "Whatever you think is best," he said, and she could hear the genuine support in his voice, so different from his usual commanding tone. Sarah moved to the desk, running her fingers along its polished surface. "First order of business, we're converting the empty floor on level 3 into a daycare center." Riley's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "For the employees?" "Yes. I've seen too many talented people struggle to balance work and family." She sat down in the chair, her chair now, and began pulling up files on the computer. "We're also implementing flexible working hours and remote work options where possible." As she spoke, her assistant brought in a stack of papers requiring immediate attention. Sarah dove right in, her natural efficiency shining through. Riley watched her work, amazed at how seamlessly she stepped into the role. "The board meeting is in an hour," he reminded her gently. Sarah looked up, determination clear in her eyes. "Good. I want to present our new direction right away." She stood, gathering her materials. "We're going to focus on sustainable growth, employee welfare, and community involvement." In the boardroom, Sarah commanded attention without Riley's usual intimidation tactics. She laid out her vision clearly and confidently, addressing concerns with patience and insight. Riley sat to her right, offering support when needed, but otherwise remaining silent. "Our employees are our greatest asset," she explained to the board members. "By investing in their well-being, we invest in our future." Some of the older board members shifted uncomfortably, but Sarah's presentation of projected numbers, showing how employee satisfaction directly correlated with productivity and innovation, began to win them over. Throughout the day, Sarah moved through the office with purpose, speaking with department heads and listening to employee concerns. Riley followed her lead, learning from her approach. He watched as she stopped to help an intern with a jammed printer, making the young woman feel valued rather than intimidated. "You know," he said during a quiet moment between meetings, "I never would have thought to do any of this." Sarah looked up from her laptop, where she was drafting a company-wide email about the upcoming changes. "That's because you were focused on the business as a machine. I see it as a community." Later that afternoon, they found themselves alone in her office. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city skyline. Sarah had just finished a call with their biggest client, who was enthusiastic about their new direction. "You're amazing," Riley said softly, watching her from the couch where he'd been reviewing reports. "I've been trying to figure out what this company needed for so long, and you see it so clearly." Sarah joined him on the couch, close enough that their shoulders touched. "It's not just about the company anymore, is it?" she asked quietly. Riley turned to face her, vulnerability clear in his expression. "No, it's not. I think this is about building something bigger than both of us." Sarah looked at their reflection in the window, her in the CEO's chair she never expected to occupy, him supporting her instead of trying to control everything. They'd come so far from that first meeting at the charity gala, when he'd asked to hold Lucy with such uncertainty in his eyes. "We're building a future," she said softly, letting her hand find his. "Not just for the company or its employees, but for us too. Riley's fingers intertwined with hers, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the gathering dusk. The weight of their shared responsibility and growing connection settled around them like a warm blanket, full of promise and possibility. Sarah stood at the window of her office, watching the early morning sunlight dance across the city skyline. 3 weeks had passed since she'd taken over as CEO, and already the company felt different. The halls buzzed with renewed energy, and employees smiled more freely. She heard the familiar sound of Riley's footsteps approaching her office. He knocked softly before entering, 2 coffee cups in hand. "I thought you might need this," he said, offering her favorite vanilla latte. "You were here before sunrise again." "Thank you." She accepted the coffee gratefully, their fingers brushing. "The quarterly reports are showing promising results. Employee satisfaction is up 30%, and productivity has increased despite the flexible hours." Riley settled into one of the chairs across from her desk, his tie slightly loosened, a small but significant change from his usually pristine appearance. "The daycare center construction is ahead of schedule," he reported, "and 3 more department heads have submitted proposals for remote work programs." Sarah smiled, remembering how skeptical some had been about her changes. "Remember when Thompson said the flexible hours would be the death of discipline? Now he's working from home 2 days a week to spend more time with his grandkids," Riley chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The sound of his genuine laughter still surprised her. It was becoming more frequent these days. Sarah moved to her desk, shifting through papers. "The new client meetings went well yesterday. They're impressed with our community outreach initiatives." "That's all you," Riley said softly. "You've brought something to this company that I never could. Heart." Sarah looked up, caught by the warmth in his voice. He'd changed so much from the cold, distant man she'd first met. Now he listened more than he spoke, supported more than he commanded. "It's not just me," she countered. "You've changed too. The way you handled the Johnson crisis last week, you were patient, understanding. The old Riley would have just fired everyone involved." He stood, moving to join her at the desk. "I had a good teacher." His eyes met hers, filled with admiration and something deeper. "You showed me there's more to leadership than control and power." Sarah felt her heart flutter. These moments between them had been happening more frequently, quiet conversations that seemed to hold more meaning than either of them acknowledged. "The board meeting yesterday," she said, trying to maintain professional distance. "When you defended my decision to invest in employee education programs, that meant a lot." "I believe in your vision, Sarah." Riley's voice was low, sincere. "I believe in you." She turned to face him fully, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "It's not just about business anymore, is it?" Riley shook his head slowly. "No, it hasn't been for a while now." He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You've changed everything, Sarah. The company, yes, but more than that. You've changed me." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow around them. "Riley." He stepped closer, his hand moving to cup her cheek. "You showed me what real strength looks like. It's not about control or power. It's about trust, about letting people in." Sarah leaned into his touch, her heart racing. "I was so afraid at first," she admitted. "Afraid of working for you, afraid of letting you get close." "And now?" His thumb traced her cheekbone gently. "Now I'm only afraid of how much I feel for you," she whispered. Riley's eyes softened, and he slowly leaned in, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. Instead, Sarah met him halfway, their lips meeting in a soft, tender kiss. It was gentle and warm, full of the trust they'd built together. When they finally pulled apart, they stayed close, foreheads touching. The morning sun wrapped around them, a quiet witness to this new beginning. In that moment, they were no longer just CEO and advisor, but two people who had found something precious in each other: trust, understanding, and love. The evening sun cast long shadows across Sarah's office as she finished reviewing the last of her emails. The day had been productive but long, filled with meetings and decisions that would shape the company's future. She glanced at the photo of Lucy on her desk, smiling at her son's beaming face. A gentle knock drew her attention. Riley stood in the doorway, his suit jacket draped over one arm, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him in the office. "Ready to call it a day?" he asked, walking into her office. "Almost," Sarah replied, closing her laptop. "Just wanted to make sure everything was set for tomorrow's presentation." Riley moved to stand beside her desk, his expression thoughtful. "You know, a year ago I would have been here until midnight, obsessing over every detail. But you've taught me there's more to life than just work." Sarah stood, gathering her things. "Is that why you're here? To remind me to go home?" "Actually," Riley said, taking her hand, "I wanted to talk about something important. Would you join me for dinner?" They ended up at the small Italian restaurant where they'd had their first business lunch months ago. The intimate setting felt different now, charged with possibility rather than professional distance. "This place brings back memories," Sarah said as they settled into their booth. "You were so intimidating back then." Riley smiled, a touch of regret in his eyes. "I was trying so hard to maintain control, to keep everyone at arm's length, including you." "And now?" Sarah asked softly. Riley reached across the table, taking her hand. "Now I realize that control was just another word for fear. I was afraid of letting anyone see the real me, afraid of being vulnerable." He paused, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "But you saw through all of that." "You let me see through it," Sarah corrected gently. "You chose to change." "Because of you," Riley said. "You showed me what real strength looks like. It's not about power or authority. It's about having the courage to be authentic, to care about others, to let people in." He took a deep breath. "Sarah, I've been doing a lot of thinking about our future." Sarah felt her heart skip. "Our future?" "Yes," Riley nodded. "Both personally and professionally. The company is thriving under your leadership, but more importantly, I'm happier than I've ever been. You and Lucy have brought so much joy into my life." "Riley," Sarah started, but he squeezed her hand gently. "Let me finish, please. I know I've made mistakes. I know I was closed off and difficult. But you never gave up on me. You saw potential in both the company and in me that I couldn't see myself." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I'm ready, Sarah. Ready to commit fully. To you, to us, to building something meaningful together." Sarah felt tears pricking at her eyes. "Are you sure? This is a big step." "I've never been more sure of anything," Riley said firmly. "I want to be there for you and Lucy. I want to build a life together, face challenges together, celebrate victories together. No more hiding behind work, no more emotional walls." "The board might have concerns about our personal relationship," Sarah pointed out, ever practical. Riley smiled. "Let them. We've proven that we work better together than apart. And honestly, Sarah, I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. What matters is us, you, me, and Lucy." They began discussing their future together, both personal and professional. They talked about balancing their roles at work with their relationship, about including Lucy in their plans, about the challenges they might face, and how they would face them together. "We'll need to be strategic about this," Sarah said, her business mind still active. The transition will take time. We have all the time in the world, Riley assured her. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever challenges come our way, we'll handle them together. Sarah squeezed his hand, feeling the truth of his words. They had both grown so much, Riley learning to open his heart, Sarah learning to trust in love again. Together, they were stronger than either had been alone. Sarah watched from the doorway as Riley sat cross-legged on the living room floor with Lucy, carefully helping her stack colorful blocks. The sight made her heart swell. 6 months ago, she never would have imagined the cold, distant CEO could be so gentle and patient with a toddler. "Higher!" Lucy demanded, her small hands clapping as Riley added another block to their tower. "Careful now," Riley said softly, steadying the wobbling structure. "We don't want it to fall." Sarah stepped into the room, carrying a tray with coffee and Lucy's sippy cup. "I think someone's having fun," she said, setting the tray on the coffee table. Riley looked up at her with a warm smile that still made her breath catch. The transformation in him was remarkable. Gone was the sharp-suited businessman who kept everyone at arm's length. In his place was a man who didn't hesitate to sit on the floor in his casual clothes, playing with a toddler. "Tower fell!" Lucy giggled as the blocks tumbled down, scattering across the carpet. "That's okay," Riley assured her, pulling her into his lap. "We can build another one. Sometimes things need to fall apart before they can be built better." Sarah settled onto the couch, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. "Speaking of building things," she said, "how do you feel about the house?" They had been looking at homes in the suburbs, something with a yard where Lucy could play. It was a big step, moving in together officially, but it felt right. "I think we found the perfect one," Riley replied, reaching for his coffee while keeping Lucy steady in his lap. "That colonial with the big backyard? I can already picture Lucy having her birthday parties there." "My birthday?" Lucy perked up, always attentive when her favorite topic was mentioned. "Not yet, sweetie," Sarah laughed. "But soon." Riley handed Lucy her sippy cup, making sure she had a good grip on it. "I made an offer this morning," he admitted. "I hope that's okay. I wanted it to be a surprise." Sarah's eyes widened. "Riley, that's amazing." She moved to join them on the floor, careful not to knock over any blocks. "Are you sure? It's a big commitment." "I've never been more sure of anything," he said, reaching for her hand. "Sarah, you and Lucy, you've shown me what really matters in life. All those years I spent chasing success, building my empire, none of it compares to this." Lucy wiggled out of Riley's lap and began rebuilding her tower, humming to herself. Sarah watched as Riley automatically reached out to steady a block that was about to fall, his attention divided between the conversation and the toddler's needs. "You're so good with her," Sarah said softly. "I never expected—" "Neither did I," Riley admitted. "But she makes it easy. She loves so freely, so completely. No agenda, no expectations, just pure trust and affection." He looked at Sarah meaningfully. "Like mother, like daughter." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. "We've come so far from that charity gala, haven't we?" "The best decision I ever made was asking to hold her that night," Riley said, watching as Lucy concentrated on placing another block. "I didn't know it then, but that moment changed everything." Lucy abandoned her blocks and crawled back to Riley, climbing into his lap again. "Tired," she announced, snuggling against his chest. Riley's arms wrapped around her automatically, cradling her close as she began to doze. He looked up at Sarah, and the emotion in his eyes took her breath away. "This is everything," he whispered, holding Lucy securely while reaching for Sarah's hand. "All those years I thought success meant power, money, control. I was so wrong. This, family, love, trust, this is what matters. This is what makes life worth living." Sarah squeezed his hand, watching as Lucy drifted off to sleep in Riley's arms, completely secure and trusting. The sight of them together, the man who had once been so closed off now holding her daughter with such tenderness, filled her heart with joy. Riley adjusted his tie, a habit he hadn't quite broken despite no longer being CEO. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of their suburban home, catching on the family photos that now lined the walls. He smiled at a recent one, Lucy on his shoulders at the park, both of them laughing while Sarah captured the moment. "Daddy!" Lucy's voice echoed through the hallway as she ran toward him, her backpack bouncing. "Are you taking me to school today?" "That's right, Princess." Riley knelt down to her level, helping her straighten her slightly crooked uniform collar. "And then I'm heading to the office to help Mommy with the quarterly review." Sarah appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her CEO attire, a sharp blazer and pencil skirt that commanded respect. She watched them with a soft smile, remembering how different things had been just a year ago. "You two better get going," she said, checking her watch. "The board meeting starts at 9, and I need my trusted advisor there." The teasing lilt in her voice made Riley grin. "Who would have thought?" he mused, standing up with Lucy's hand in his. The mighty Riley Daniels, happy to be second in command. Sarah stepped forward to straighten his tie, though it didn't need it. "You're more than that, and you know it. The board respects you more now than ever." It was true. Since stepping down as CEO, Riley had discovered a different kind of influence, one built on mutual respect and collaboration rather than power and control. His relationship with the board had transformed from tense oversight to genuine partnership. "Come on, Lucy girl," he said, grabbing her lunchbox from the counter. "Let's get you to school." The drive to Lucy's elementary school was filled with her chatter about her upcoming class presentation. Riley listened intently, asking questions and offering encouragement. These morning drives had become his favorite part of the day, a far cry from his previous life of early morning stress and endless phone calls. After dropping Lucy off, Riley headed to the office. The security guard greeted him warmly. Gone was the intimidating aura that used to make employees scatter. He walked through the lobby, stopping to chat with various team members, genuinely interested in their projects and concerns. In his office, smaller now, but with a better view, Riley reviewed the quarterly numbers. The company was thriving under Sarah's leadership, her innovative approaches and emphasis on work-life balance resulting in record productivity and employee satisfaction. Sarah knocked on his doorframe, 2 coffee cups in hand. "Ready for the board meeting?" "Just finishing up my notes," he replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "The new product line is exceeding expectations." "Thanks to your market analysis," Sarah said, perching on the edge of his desk. "You know, sometimes I wonder if you knew all along that this would work out better for everyone." Riley shook his head, setting down his coffee. "I was terrified," he admitted. "Letting go of control went against everything I thought I knew about success. But watching you lead, seeing how you balance everything—" He stood up, moving to stand beside her. "You've taught me more about true leadership than all my years as CEO." Sarah leaned into him slightly, careful not to wrinkle either of their suits. "We make a good team." "The best," Riley agreed, gathering his papers for the meeting. "Though I still can't believe how much has changed. Remember when I thought showing emotion was a weakness? You've come a long way from the man who could barely hold a conversation about feelings," Sarah teased. "Now you're the one organizing family game nights and weekend picnics." "Speaking of which," Riley said as they walked toward the boardroom, "Lucy wants to have her birthday party at the zoo this year. I was thinking we could rent out the entire educational center." Sarah listened as Riley enthusiastically outlined his plans, her heart full of pride. He had transformed from a man who measured success in dollars and deals to someone who found joy in planning a child's birthday party. His ambition hadn't disappeared. It had simply shifted focus, channeling into building a strong family and supporting the company's sustainable growth. The boardroom doors opened, and Sarah stepped in first, every inch the capable CEO. Riley followed, ready to support her vision while adding his own insights. Together, they had created something far more valuable than either of them had originally imagined, a partnership built on trust, respect, and love. Riley stood at the window of his office, watching the city bustle below. The morning sun caught the glass facades of neighboring buildings, creating a brilliant display that matched his mood. On his desk, the latest financial reports showed record-breaking numbers. The company wasn't just surviving, it was thriving under Sarah's leadership. He heard familiar footsteps approaching and smiled, not turning around. Sarah's reflection appeared in the window beside his, and he felt her hand slip into his. "Admiring the view?" she asked, squeezing his hand. "Admiring everything," Riley replied, finally turning to face her. "The Q4 numbers are incredible. Your new client retention program is working better than anyone predicted." Sarah's eyes sparkled with pride, but she shook her head. "Our program," she corrected him. "Your market analysis made it possible. We're a team, remember?" The word team still warmed him inside. A year ago, he would have scoffed at the idea of sharing credit, of being anyone's support system. Now it felt natural. "The board meeting went well," Sarah continued, moving to perch on the edge of his desk. "They've approved the expansion into sustainable energy solutions. Your presentation really won them over." Riley joined her at the desk, picking up the thick folder of projections and proposals they'd worked on together. "They trust your vision," he said. "And they're right, too. You see possibilities I never could." "Because you taught me the foundation," Sarah replied. "I just built on what you created." The intercom buzzed, and his assistant's voice came through. "Mr. Daniels, the staff is gathered in the conference room for the announcement." Riley stood, offering Sarah his hand. "Ready to share the good news?" They walked together through the office, noting how different the atmosphere was now. Gone was the tense, competitive environment he'd once fostered. Instead, there was collaborative energy, with team members freely sharing ideas across departments. The conference room was packed with employees, all talking excitedly. They fell quiet as Sarah and Riley entered, but their expressions were eager rather than fearful, another welcome change from the past. Sarah took her place at the front of the room, radiating confidence. "Good morning, everyone. As you know, we've just closed our most successful quarter to date. But more importantly, we've done it while maintaining our commitment to work-life balance and sustainable practices." Riley watched from the side, feeling pride swell in his chest. Sarah commanded the room naturally, her warmth and authenticity drawing people in. She detailed the company's achievements, giving credit to specific teams and individuals, making everyone feel valued and seen. "And now," she said, gesturing for Riley to join her, "we have an announcement about our future direction." Riley stepped forward, standing beside her. "We're expanding into sustainable energy solutions," he announced. "But we're doing it differently than our competitors. We're focusing on community-based initiatives, making clean energy accessible to everyone, not just those who can afford luxury prices." The room erupted in applause and excited chatter. This was what set them apart now, not just pursuing profits, but making a real difference in people's lives. As the team broke into smaller groups to discuss the announcement, Sarah and Riley slipped away to her office. A bottle of champagne was waiting, courtesy of her assistant. "Remember when you first asked to hold Lucy at that charity gala?" Sarah asked, as Riley poured 2 glasses. "Who would have thought we'd end up here?" Riley handed her a glass, remembering that night clearly. "I was so lost then," he admitted. "Successful on paper, but empty inside. You and Lucy showed me what really matters." Sarah raised her glass. "To unexpected beginnings," To trust, Riley added. To love, Sarah finished, clinking her glass against his. They stood together, looking out at the city they were helping to change, their fingers intertwined. The company's success was remarkable, but what they'd built together, trust, partnership, family, that was the real achievement. Riley stood in his office, now Sarah's primary workspace, watching her review quarterly reports. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across her face as she concentrated, reminding him of that first night at the charity gala. The memory of asking to hold Lucy felt like a lifetime ago, yet the warmth of that moment still lingered. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked, catching his thoughtful expression. "How different everything is now," Riley replied, moving to sit across from her. "A year ago I thought success meant having the biggest office, the most control, the highest profits. I was so wrong." Sarah set down her pen and reached across the desk to take his hand. "You've come so far. We both have. Remember when I first offered you the job?" Riley chuckled, shaking his head. "I thought I was being so generous, so businesslike about it all." "You were trying to keep control," Sarah said softly. "To keep your walls up." "And you knocked them all down anyway," Riley smiled. "Not just with the company, but with everything." Through the glass walls of the office, they could see their employees working together, engaged in animated discussions. The atmosphere was collaborative and energetic, a far cry from the tense, competitive environment Riley had once cultivated. "Lucy asked me this morning why I smile more now," Riley shared, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "She's so perceptive for a toddler." Sarah laughed. "She's always been good at reading people. Even at the gala, she knew you needed that moment with her." They fell into a comfortable silence, both reflecting on their journey. The company's transformation mirrored their own, from rigid hierarchy to flexible partnership, from cold efficiency to warm collaboration. "I was looking at these earlier," Sarah said, pulling out some old photographs from her desk drawer. They showed the company's early days under Riley's leadership, stark, modern, and impersonal. Next to them were recent photos from the company picnic, filled with smiling faces and genuine connections. "Sometimes I wonder what my younger self would think of all this," Riley mused, comparing the images. "The man who thought emotions were a weakness, who kept everyone at arm's length." "He'd probably be horrified," Sarah teased. "The great Riley Daniels playing with blocks on the office floor with a toddler, attending team-building workshops, actually enjoying family dinner nights." Riley laughed, but his eyes were serious. He needed to learn. I needed to learn about trust, about love, about what really matters. Sarah stood and moved around the desk, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "We all did. Remember how scared I was to take this position? How convinced I was that I couldn't lead?" "You were born to lead," Riley said firmly. "You just needed someone to believe in you as much as you believed in everyone else." Through the window, they could see the city stretching out before them. The same view that had once represented Riley's solitary empire now symbolized something entirely different. A shared vision, a partnership, a future built on trust and love. "The board meeting next week," Sarah said. "I want to present our new family-friendly workplace initiatives. Expanded parental leave, on-site childcare, flexible scheduling. Everything we've discussed." Riley nodded, pride evident in his expression. "You're changing more than just our company, you know. Other businesses are starting to follow our lead." "We're changing it," Sarah corrected him. "Your business expertise combined with genuine care for people, that's what makes it work." The afternoon light was starting to fade, painting the sky in soft pinks and purples. Soon they would head home, where Lucy waited with her stacks of books and endless questions. Their evening would be filled with bedtime stories, quiet conversations, and the kind of contentment Riley had never known existed. "I never thought I could have this," Riley admitted softly. Success and love, purpose and family. I always thought it had to be one or the other. Sarah squeezed his hand. Sometimes the best things in life come when we stop trying to control everything and just let ourselves be happy.